Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind from 1984. And this is continuing my year-long quest to review all of the films of Studio Ghibli and all of the films of Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata before they formed Studio Ghibli. And this is often considered to be the first Studio Ghibli film, although it was actually technically not, but pretty much is, because it was made by Topcraft, who Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata would hire most of to make Studio Ghibli. So it's kind of safe to say this is a Studio Ghibli film because it features pretty much all of the big heavy hitters of Studio Ghibli that would become known for working on a Studio Ghibli film, so it kind of is understandable, but technically it isn't. Although you could say that about a lot of other stuff that Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata worked on before, but this one more so than all that is written like and feels like a Studio Ghibli film. And it really kind of has the blueprint for a lot of the Studio Ghibli films that would happen later. Specifically, like, it reminds me a lot of later films like Princess Mononoke. And this often reminds me of Hollis Prince of the Sun or the Little Norse Prince Valiant or whatever you want to call it. In the 60s, Isao Takahata directed a film that Hayao Miyazaki worked on. It was the first thing they worked on together. And it was really a film to have animation be taken more seriously by adults. And this film is very much an adult animated film. I wouldn't really say this is a film for kids, maybe like 13, but there's a lot of complexities in it. There's not really a good versus evil struggle. There's more people are acting out of fear, and Nausicaä has to kind of, or Nausicaä as they refer to her in the Japanese version, has to take into account their fears and their worries about this post-apocalyptic world and not look at them as evil, but kind of misunderstood and trying to fight for the survival of the species, of the human species. But Nausicaä knows that's really a bad idea, and she doesn't like loss of life. She doesn't want a war, even though humanity seems to, or what's left of humanity in this film, seems to really want that. And that's more of an adult idea. I mean, still, I think a lot of the way this film used conflict is ahead of its time. The Zen Buddhist idea towards it, that not that there's a good or bad side. And I think often in big budget films or science fiction, we simplify it so that we don't really have complex villains or complex characters. And the fact that there isn't really a villain of this piece, this is a lot more advanced. Oftentimes I felt this film was maybe too complicated. After the second time I watched it, I go, it's not that it's too complicated, it's very grown up about itself. It's a very mature film. While still having action sequences and fun, it doesn't like have that moment where someone gets shot down and someone goes, yes, awesome. That almost feels inappropriate. Like, Nausicaä reacts to a plane getting shot down who is shooting the plane she was in. And to me, I think that's an interesting way to go about a main character, and such a strong female character. I believe his first really strong female character, well, except for Panda Go Panda, I guess, but one of his first more understanding female characters who's really fighting for the good of the community. Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind takes place 1,000 years after the Industrial Age failed and an apocalyptic event happened where most of the world was destroyed, and it's kind of supposed to be humanity's twilight age. They never really say that in the film, but that's how Hayao Miyazaki describes it, and since he wrote it, I'm going to go with that. There are various towns and kingdoms, and they can't go into what is called the Sea of Decay, which is where all these spores, once they infect your lungs, you'll die within about 5 minutes. You can only go in there with a face mask. She goes in there and kind of explores nature, explores these forests, explores these spores, and sees what they're doing and finding things for her kingdom, which is the Valley of the Wind. And she's living there, and she runs into a very gifted swordsman from the Valley of the Wind called Lord Yupa, and he brings her back. And then as they are hanging out in the Valley of the Wind, a big aircraft crashes in the Valley of the Wind, and it has one of the fire monsters who brought on the 7 days of fire that destroyed almost everything 1,000 years ago. They're trying to use it as a weapon to kind of destroy all these things and destroy the Ohms, who are these big kind of bug-like creatures who destroy everything in their wake and live in the Sea of Decay. The Tomika, they're one of the kingdoms, and they want to use it to burn down the Sea of Decay and bring back the Age of Man, even though Nausicaä knows that really won't do anything, because every time they have done that, the Sea of Decay has come back even worse than before, and the Ohms will rage and cover the earth. And Nausicaä has to go with them to convince them that they shouldn't do that, and go on various adventures from that. Now, this film is based on a manga written by Hayao Hayao Miyazaki wrote it 2 years before. Often people credit this as he wrote the manga to get the film made. That, to my understanding and from my interviews I've read with him, is inaccurate. What he really did was he was writing the manga and they asked him if he wanted to make a film out of it. So I don't know why people think that. He actually kept writing the manga and he wrote it until about 1994. Because this was not developed as a film first, one of the ways the story is told is it almost feels episodic, but he does it in such a interesting way. This film feels like a lot of different parts, and the first time I watched it, I felt like I liked it, but it felt so complicated and I felt like there's so many parts. But that's kind of the joy of it, because his storytelling is so distinct, and going through Nausicaä with these various journeys. I know she is named after a character from Homer's The Odyssey, a princess who saves Ulysses. She's such an interesting character to follow because most of it's kind of from her perspective. They break perspective a few times, but you're really following her dealing with this conflict and understanding this world. It does feel like a lot of different things kind of mushed together. Even the score is kind of all over the place. It has these kind of sweeping, almost James Bond-esque scores, and then he has a solo piano, and then he has a synthesizer, and then he has a sitar. It feels like 7 or 8 different scores mixed together, or 7 or 8 different composers mixed together, but it's one guy. And this film often feels like that. You have 3 fighting kingdoms, you have the Ulms coming, you have the Sea of Decay, you have the fire monsters, you have all these details. It's definitely very complicated and incredibly ambitious. It's his second feature film, and you could consider it kind of his first film of him being an auteur. It's the first film where he's really Hayao Miyazaki. It's written by and developed by Hayao Miyazaki. Later, when you look at something like Princess Mononoke, it is complicated, but it feels like it's more cohesive. This doesn't feel as cohesive, but it somehow is, based on how strong the storytelling is and how strong of a character Nausicaä is. And if she didn't care about everything, and particularly that scene where that ship goes down that's shooting at them and she just wants them to stop fighting, like she doesn't want there to be a war, if there wasn't a character who cared about animals and humanity and all these different parts, then I don't think you could have all these different perspectives and all these different things going on. It just simply wouldn't work the same way. And because you have a character like that who cares not just about the human community but the animals and the Sea of Decay and what the Sea of Decay does for them, she really brings it all together so that this can really work. A lesser director could obviously get lost in this and care too much about one thing, and he almost doesn't. He forgets about some things, he doesn't go back to certain things for a while, other things come back, characters just show up as, oh, I'm connected to this person, and then they're seemingly gone after that. It somehow flows, even though general logic would, if someone told you about it, you would think, oh, it really doesn't. Like, what the hell is going on with all this stuff? It's just so complicated. But it really does work. It's really very smart about itself, and it almost feels tranquil at the end. You really feel like you've gone on an event because you've gone through this. This is really a true epic. When I was watching this film, I was thinking, and this will probably date this review very much, but we're always talking about the Benchell test and feminism in film and how women are used in film. And when I was watching this film, I was like, this film and most of Hayao Miyazaki's films would pass that. And I never hear that mentioned. Their view of Nausicaä, or Nausicaä as she's referred to in the Japanese version, was so ahead of its time that when it was released, it was a big hit in Japan. When it was released in America, they cut 20 minutes out of it, changed a lot of its themes, made it more simplistic, and on the poster, the character of Nausicaä is like kind of on the side. It makes like this male character look like he's the main character or something, because I guess they didn't feel like that was ready for American audiences at the time. And this was 30 years ago. When I look at and think about all our problems with Hollywood, I think one of the things that makes this kind of so, and makes Hayao Miyazaki such an influential filmmaker, is not only is she a strong female character and it passes this silly test or whatever, it shows a character who, it doesn't really matter to me as much about her gender. She's a strong female character, she's a strong character, but really her humanity is more than just gender-based. And I think that's probably why maybe people don't use it as an example, because it kind of brings up maybe the fault in Hollywood rather than the fault in a major studio in Japan that's been producing these kind of films for a long time. And I think it speaks to how smart of a storyteller he is. This film's all about accepting nature and accepting the community, and Hayao Miyazaki said in an interview he feels like she could have easily gone with the animal side rather than the human side. She understands how both can work in kind of harmony, even if humanity, it might be the end of humanity at a certain point after this. She figures out ways that they can all live in harmony and not have humanity keep pushing and pushing itself out of existence. I like that a lot about his characters because they care so much about the whole rather than a certain side, a right side, and that's such a better way for someone like a kid to grow up with that kind of a film. These films kind of embrace a sense of maturity that most people don't want to embrace in their film going. They want it to be simpler, they want it to be easier to understand. And when you look at the US cut Warriors of the Wind, that's basically the way it was in the 80s for the most part when it came to science fiction and things like that. Eventually in 2005, so they waited 21 years, but was dubbed in English and given a real release on DVD. It kind of shows what maturity can be done through animation. When I think of Hall's Prince of the Sun, and that was their attempt at that time to bring animation to adults. This film's so mature and so complex and so smart. It's like, how can you not view animation as a more mature medium? How can you not see it's just another form of storytelling? And you can do that with a film like this, and how smart and wonderful that really is. I think that's why maybe a lot of people look at this film as the first Studio Ghibli film, because when I think of their films, I think of how it's so much more smarter, but also digestible in a way that Hollywood and a lot of animation studios haven't mastered. He's really an auteur in the real sense of the word, and to show this epic tale of environmentalism in this post-apocalyptic world, and it really meant something to the environmental movement in Japan. And it's interesting he's so fascinated by post-apocalyptic societies that go back to nature, much like he did in Future Boy Conan, which was made before this. The main character, I think in this, understands how to be more at one because they're closer to nature. It's not just like, yeah, you know, we should recycle and build trees and that's like the end of the movie. It goes throughout this film, you know, she really cares about the alms. In the beginning, she sees an alm and she's like, that's a beautiful creature. And I didn't get that from the other characters. She seemed to be able to calm down. Some people say she's saintly and naive, but I really felt like she was a full fleshed out character. And a lot of times in these films, you have the chosen one and everything they fucking do is amazing or whatever, which becomes annoying because I end up a lot of times hating that character. But I don't hate Nausicaä. I think she's a strong, amazing woman, and she lives up to her village proclaiming her and singing her praises. And there's often times where you see they love her, but you also see the side of her alone, and you see various different sides of her. It's not just the one, you know, you're so great, you're so wonderful. She's so much more complex than that. You know, when she comes back into town after the opening scene, she's fixing a windmill. She's not like basking in like, yeah, get me some grapes or something. You know, she's not that into it almost. She seems to care more about getting things done and what needs to be done. And I think that's what I love about his characters. If I had a daughter one day, I would want her to see something like this because I think it shows more of not just the princess thing. Some of the times I look at these characters and I think, God, I wish I was that good of a person, and I wish I could live in the endings of some of these. Maybe that's part of why I like them, but I think it's also because the story is so well told, and especially this one, I can understand why he became so big after this, because how the fuck did he get this to work? With Kiki and Totoro, I almost kind of can comprehend it, but in this, it's like, and all these different sides, and it feels episodic, and it feels like it shouldn't work, but it does because of such a strong female character. It's both about character and community. Very rarely do I see a film that can do that as flawlessly as this. He really understands storytelling, and you can tell he's someone who reads lots of story and reads literature and classic film and understands how to build a character and build it through a narrative. And that's why Nausicaä almost works so well. This film came out and was like triumphant in being so different and being so adult. And I think at this time he had been from Horus Prince of the Sun to this. I think what changed is he changed from being someone who could be a craftsman to someone who can be a great storyteller. And I think that's why this film is considered the first Studio Ghibli film, because it's really sends out a shot to like, this is a great storyteller, this is a great group of people who eventually will become Studio Ghibli, right, almost a year after this is released. And they made this film in 9 months, which seems unfathomable that they could make this wonderful film in such a short amount of time, which I think they made Castle of Cagliostro in almost the same amount of time. which is just also amazing. It's a perfectly constructed, complex, beautiful animated film, and I can absolutely understand how this made him into the name that would eventually be the Hayao Miyazaki we know today. So if you have seen Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. So my next Studio Ghibli film will be Castle in the Sky from 1986. It's the actually official first film from Studio Ghibli. I hope to have that in a few weeks. I'm sorry this month didn't produce as many reviews. I was doing the Godzilla reviews and everything like that. But I hope to have Castle in the Sky fairly shortly, in maybe 2 weeks. We'll see. But that will be the next one. And thank you for watching, and I hope to see you then.